This video has been requested by a Patreon supporter, so if you've got any questions that you want me to try and answer, or if there's a video that you'd like me to make, then you can support Nyishar on Patreon. The link is down below, and I'll just respond to any of the questions or requests by making videos like this one. So this particular video was requested by Richard, who wants to explore the benefits of Calamus root. So let's get into it. Calamus is a medicinal plant that likes to grow in wetland areas, and it's native to India, Japan, China, and really just all across Central Asia. And it was introduced to America and Europe during the 16th century due to its popularity as a natural medicine. It's also known as sweet flag, which was a name given to it by Henry David Thoreau, because the mature plant is tall, slim, and sturdy, and in that way it resembles a flagpole, plus it gives off a very sweet aroma, so obviously this is where the name sweet flag comes from. And in the Ayurvedic tradition, it's also known as vacha, and it has a very long history of use in India and Asia. The part used for medicine is the root, and it has a number of important health benefits. For example, it stimulates the secretion of bile and gastric juices, and it has long been considered an excellent medicine for increasing digestive fire. But it has this really interesting kind of bi-dimensional nature because it stimulates digestion by increasing digestive heat and our ability to cook the food down and assimilate the nutrients, but then it also has a cooling mechanism that reduces inflammation elsewhere in the body. Calamus root has a number of other uses. It has antibiotic activity against diphtheria, for example, but it has one main use, which is what I want to focus on in this video, because that is the primary reason that physicians have prescribed this medicine for hundreds, if not thousands of years. So Calamus root is, in a sense, psychoactive, not in the hallucinogenic sense, but in the sense that it's active psychologically. And to understand this properly, I want to try and cover it from a slightly different perspective in the hope that we can shed some light on exactly how it works in this way. Aside from Ayurveda, Calamus root has been an important part of Tibetan medicine for a long time as well. Now, according to the Tibetan tradition, Calamus root is an effective medicine for a condition called Nying Lung, which means wind in the heart. But to understand what this condition is and how it manifests, we need to take a quick look at a fundamental concept in Tibetan medicine. So according to the medical system of Tibet, the unobstructed, pure nature of the mind is vast, expansive, unlimited openness. It's pure awareness. And in many spiritual traditions, this would be considered the enlightened state. However, the mind also has another component, the element of wind. Wind is what gives movement to the mind. It enables the mind to think, to contemplate, and reflect on external phenomena. So the wind is what animates the clarity of the mind, and it gives the mind direction and the ability to focus on phenomena. The internal wind element is very much like the chi or prana of the Chinese and Indian medical systems, the energy that travels throughout the vast and omnipresent meridian system of the body. And there's many different types of wind. They function in different locations, they have different functions and different roles to play. And while I'm not going to get stuck into that in this video, I do want to give a quick basic overview. The Tibetan medical tradition says that the mind is essentially immaterial. It doesn't have a body, and therefore it doesn't have any specific fixed location within the physical body. But the energy of wind, on the other hand, is of a material nature. It's very subtle, but there's something more substantial about the movement energy of wind than the clear open nature of the mind. So the wind is essentially this active part of the mind that enables the mind to process and perceive all of the experiences of this life. And the five senses are also all controlled by different aspects of this wind. Each sense is controlled by a different type of wind. And so the sense organs, the eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, and the tactile body sense, the sense of touch, all of these are literally windows through which the mind can perceive the world around us. All of these sensory winds that control the functions of the sense organs are all active within the brain, which is where our first impressions are recorded. But in the heart area, we also have another aspect to our consciousness. The heart center is like the root of these different sense consciousnesses, and it's also a type of memory. Now, the brain is like a mechanical memory, and the experiences recorded in the brain make an impression on the memory of the heart, which is more of an emotional memory. So experiences that have a really big impact on us, whether they're positive or negative, are all saved and stored in the consciousness of the heart. And there are many other conscious locations in the body where the mind is active, but again, that's something that we can explore another time. When we go through some sort of trauma, the sensory winds in the brain will process the experience. They'll kind of process the data of the trauma in a very objective manner. But the impression that that makes on the emotional winds of the heart is very subjective. And so it can elicit a very strong emotional response. The impact that trauma can have on the heart consciousness can really give rise to sensations of fear, anxiety, hatred. Really, any emotional response is possible, but the point here is that the emotional consciousness of the heart has become traumatized. In modern culture, the fight or flight response has become something that is affecting so many people on an ongoing day-to-day chronic basis. So trauma becomes almost constant, and the emotional mind becomes very unstable because of that. So the emotional winds of the heart become very turbulent, erratic, and they can create havoc psychologically. Anxiety, depression, hypersensitivity, insomnia, or even conditions like bipolar disorder are all symptoms of this phenomenon, of having unstable wind energy in the heart consciousness, which, as I mentioned earlier, is referred to as Nyinglung, or heart wind in Tibetan. So this is a key attribute of Calamus root because it directly affects the emotional wind of the heart. It pacifies it and calms it down, and it really reduces the stormy winds of trauma. And by doing so, it reduces the severity of things like anxiety, fear, obsessive compulsive disorder, or, any other manifestations of chronic stress. And this leads onto another aspect of this herb, because it's been used for centuries as an antidote to stuttering. Now, the root has a very, very strong taste, but chewing on just a small portion of it has been known to significantly help manage nervous speech impediments. And again, this relates to the internal wind element of the body and mind, because there's another type of wind called the ascending wind, which rises up from the chest, up through the throat and out, and it provides the capacity for speech. It gives us eloquence, it allows us to communicate effectively, but if there's a disturbance in this wind due to some sort of trauma, then our ability to communicate is going to be compromised. And so again, we can see that Calamus root is pacifying the tension and repetitive behavior that can result from trauma. Now, it's important to mention the controversy around this plant because it was banned by the FDA in 1968, after studies had shown that the triploid and tetraploid varieties of this plant contained beta-acerone. Now, beta-acerone is antifungal against Aspergillus species, but in massive doses it can be carcinogenic, as demonstrated by studies that were done on rats who developed tumours after receiving enormous doses of it. So there still isn't any conclusive evidence to suggest that this plant isn't safe for human consumption, especially considering that you're never going to be able to consume enough of it for it to have that kind of carcinogenic effect, because acerone is a very strong emetic, which means that even after a reasonably small dose, you'll easily find yourself vomiting uncontrollably for quite a while. So the diploid variety of this plant has been officially recognized as being completely safe for human consumption because it does have a slightly different chemical profile, but even then, the effective dosage is very small. You know, this is a very potent substance, and a little bit does go a long way. So calamus root can be made into a tea. Only a quarter or perhaps a third of a teaspoon is sufficient for one adult human being. And, you know, it can also be made into an extract or just chewed on for a few minutes. Just a small amount of the dried root to be chewed on. The taste is very, very strong. It's very unusual, and it definitely takes some getting used to. And it's best to spit out the pulp once the intensity of the flavor dies down. So to conclude, this is an excellent medicine for helping to pacify psychological and emotional trauma and things like stuttering and other repetitive nervous disorders, and it's also really good for increasing digestive fire. But it does need to be said that this plant needs to be approached with respect, and it needs to be used responsibly. So remember, if you've got a request for a video or you've just got questions that you want me to try and answer, then you can support Nyishar on Patreon. The link is down below, and every month I'm going to be making a video just like this one responding to somebody's Patreon request. So that's it for this video. So until next time, take care.